100 Ways to Motivate Yourself. Change your life forever. Steve Chandler. 100 Ways. Number 1. Get on your deathbed. A number of years ago, when I was working with a psychotherapist, Davis Brandon, she put me through her deathbed exercise. I was asked to clearly imagine myself lying in my own deathbed and to fully realize the feelings connected with dying and saying goodbye. Then she asked me to mentally invite the people in my life who were important to me to visit my bedside, one at a time. As I visualized each friend and relative coming in to visit me, I had to speak to them out loud. I had to say to them what I wanted them to know as I was dying. As I spoke to each person, I could feel my voice breaking. Somehow, I couldn't help breaking down. My eyes were filled with tears. I experienced such a sense of loss. It was not my own life I was mourning. It was the love I was losing. To be more exact, it was a communication of love that had never been there. During this difficult exercise, I really got to see how much I'd left out of my life. How many wonderful feelings I had about my children, for example, that I would never explicitly expressed. At the end of the exercise, I was an emotional mess. I had really cried that hard in my life, but when those emotions cleared, a wonderful things happened. I was clear. I knew what was really important and who really mattered to me. I understood for the first time what Josh Patton meant when he said, "Death can be more exciting than life." From that day on, I vowed not to leave anything to chance. I made up my mind never to leave anything unshared. I wanted to live as if I might die any moment. The entire experience altered the way I have related to people ever since. And the great point of the exercise wasn't lost on me. We don't have to wait until we are actually near death to receive these benefits of being mortal. We can create the experience anytime we want. A few years later, when my mother lay dying in a hospital in Tucson, I rushed to her side to hold her hand and repeat to her all the love and gratitude I felt for who she had been for me. When she finally died, my grieving was very intense, but very short. In a matter of days, I felt that everything great about my mother had entered into me and would live there as a loving spirit forever. A year and a half before my father's death, I began to chant him letters and poems about his contribution of my life. He lived his last months and died in the grave of chronic illness. So communicating and getting through to him in person wasn't always easy. But I always felt good that he had those letters and poems to read. Once he called me after I had sent him a Father's Day poem, and he said, "Hey, I guess I wasn't such a bad father after all." Poet William Blake warned us about keeping our thoughts locked up until we die, when thoughts is closed. In caves, he wrote, "Then love will show its roots in deepest hell. Pretending you aren't going to die is detrimental to your enjoyment of life. It is detrimental in the same way that it would be detrimental for a basketball player to pretend there was no end to the game he was playing. That player would reduce his intensity, adopt a lazy playing style, and of course, end up not having any fun at all. Without an end, there is no game. Without being conscious of death, you can't die fully aware of the gift of life. Yet many of us, including myself, keep pretending that our life's game will have no end. We keep planning to do great things someday when we feel like it. We assign our goals and dreams to that imaginary island in the sea that Danish Wetley calls someday else. We find ourselves saying, someday I'll do this, and someday I'll do that. Confronting our own death doesn't have to wait until we run out of life. In fact, being able to vividly imagine our last hours on our deathbed creates a paradoxical sensation, the feeling of being born all over again, the first stage to fearless self-motivation. People living deeply, wrote poet and diarist Anna Sneen, have no fear of death. And as Bob Dylan has sung, he who is not busy being born is busy dying. Number 2, stay hungry. Arnold Schwarzenegger was not famous yet in 1976 when he and I had lunch together at the DoubleTree Inn in Tucson, Arizona. Not one person in the restaurant recognized him. He was in town publicizing the movie Stay Hungry, a box office disappointment he had just made with Jeff Bridges and Sally Field. I was a sports columnist for the Tucson Citizen at the time, and my assignment was to spend a full day one-on-one with Arnold and write a feature story about him for our newspaper's Sunday magazine. I too had no idea who he was or who he was going to become. I agreed to spend the day with him because I had to. It was an assignment, and although I took to it with an uninspired attitude, it was one I would never forget. Perhaps the most memorable part of that day with Arnold occurred when we took an hour for lunch. I had my reporter's notebook out and was asking questions for the story while we ate. At one point, I casually asked him, now that you have retired from bodybuilding, what are you going to do next? And with a voice as calm as if he were telling me about some untamed travel plans, he said, I'm going to be the number 1 box office star in all of Hollywood. Mind you, this was not the slim, aerobic Arnold we know today. This man was pumped up and huge. So for my own physical sense of well-being, I tried to appear to find his goal reasonable. I tried not to show my shock and amusement at his plan. After all, his first attempt at movies didn't promise much, and his Austrian accent and awkward, monstrous build didn't suggest instant acceptance by movie audiences. I finally managed to match his calm demeanor, and I asked him just how he planned to become a Hollywood top star. It's the same process I used in bodybuilding, he explained. What you do is create a vision of who you want to be and then live into that picture as if it were already true. It sounded ridiculously simple. Too simple to mean anything, but I wrote it down and I never forgot it. I'll never forget The moment when some entertainment TV show was saying that box office receipts from his second Terminator movie had made him the most popular box office draw in the world. Was he psychic? Or was there something to his formula? Over the years, I have used Arnold's idea of creating a vision as a motivational tool. I have also elaborated on it in my corporate training seminars. I invite people to notice that Arnold said that you create a vision. He did not say that you wait until you receive a vision. You create one, in other words, you make it up. A major part of living a life of self-motivation is having something to wake up in the morning, something that you are up to in life so that you will stay hungry. The vision can be created right now, better now than later. You can always change it if you want, but don't live a moment longer without one. Watch what being hungry to live that vision does to your ability to motivate yourself.